Hey everybody, welcome back to HEMA Fight Breakdowns. Today I want to talk a little bit more about grappling, specifically the differences between overhooks and underhooks and the advantages that underhooks have in a grapple. Now, if you have wrestled really at any point in your life, you've probably heard this before, which is that underhooks are the best. They are the single greatest thing that anyone can do in order to gain leverage over another person's body. So we're going to watch the clip and I want you to pay attention to the underhook my opponent gets on me.
Big hugs.
So, what happened here? We come together in basically a doubly missed thrust, or really I just parried the thrust, but my opponent decides to go in and get to this classic really close grapple. Now, I managed to stop his momentum forward and prevent him from just getting through me immediately. But what I want you to pay attention to is this underhook right here. This is the first thing my opponent did, and this underhook not only prevented me from hitting them back, but it aided them in the throw that they would do seconds later. So the next thing to pay attention to is what I attempt to do with my arm. See, right now my arm is boxed out by my opponent's grip. If you see right here, my opponent's grip is basically preventing me, as well as my own sword, unfortunately, from pulling up and getting onto an important side of my opponent's sword. I could theoretically disengage underneath and go for my own underhook, but instead what I do is I disengage and I go for my own overhook. I basically snake my arm over the top of my opponent and I wrap it down to my hip so that now his sword arm is controlled. The problem is that there's not as much leverage and control over my opponent's body here as he has over me because of his underhook. If you want to imagine pulling someone's arm down by the elbow, there's a lot of structure there. You have your hips, your legs, everything's underneath of it, and pretty much no matter how hard you pull, it's very difficult to get their body to turn in that direction. But if you think about the opposite with an underhook, think about all the leverage my opponent has over me. They can post up with their leg and with their shoulder and with their bicep and their arm. And all they have to do is push my arm up in the air and pin it to my head. And what that does is it gives you great control over my posture because you can manipulate my shoulders, you can manipulate my arms, and you can put them in a position that's not only safe, but put it in a position where he can easily manipulate my weight and the shifting of my weight back and forth as he pleases. So, and that's exactly what happens here. Because of this underhook, he snakes my left leg with his own knee. And because he's able to push up with his left leg, up with his left arm, up with his left side of his torso, and push my entire body over to my left side with his entire body, there's really nothing that I can do. No amount of strength in my leg is going to get my leg back down on the ground. No amount of strength in my right leg is going to help me balance on the left side, which I no longer have a base for. And that's why the throw works. So what does this mean for underhooks? So underhooks have a little bit of a pro and con. Pro, they're the absolute greatest hold you can have on your opponent when it comes to throwing. But the con is demonstrated right here, which is that it does not do a great job of tying up your opponent's dominant arm and preventing them from just beating down on you with pommel strikes, cuts, whatever. Theoretically, if I was a bit more aware of what was going on, or if I just had it in my brain, right about here, or maybe you could even say right about here, where I'm finally getting this blade out of the way and the threat of the pommel strike is no longer on me, there's nothing really preventing me from levering my own arm up and bringing it down on my opponent's head. And that's because the underhook, where it has great control of the torso, doesn't have as great of control of the arm. In something like traditional wrestling, this isn't a problem. This little hammer fist on top of somebody's head pretty much does nothing. But with a 4-pound sword and a nice little metal tip on the end of it, what I essentially have is a brick in my hand, a steel brick. And even though there's not a lot of range of motion that can be delivered, I can still generate enough force moving my own body down and pulling with my lats and bicep to drive a hard object into somebody's head and cause some damage. So what can be done to improve the underhook? Well, going back to the original base, what you're going to want to do with any underhook on the dominant side is do exactly what my opponent did here in the initial, which is try to pin my bicep to my right ear. Pin your opponent's arm to their head. because look at where his head is. It's right underneath of my arm. Even if I have all the strength of what is essentially just my bicep levering my arm at 90 degrees on top of his head, that's not a good pommel. That's not enough. In order to deliver a proper pommel, you need space. And if you pin your opponent's arm to their head, space is exactly what they're not going to get. So what I would recommend is, again, when doing these underhooks, do exactly what you see here. Go in, wrap your arm underneath their arm, but raise it up a little bit more maybe than you would be used to. And try to wrap your left arm around the back side of their head. And what this will do is it will act in pinning their arm to their head. If it lets go a little bit, that's okay. But what you want to avoid is this situation right here. Now, obviously, I'm getting thrown, so it's not exactly applicable. I'm more or less clinging to my opponent's head for dear life. But right here, what you could theoretically see is if I wasn't in the process of getting thrown and my left leg was on the ground, I could pretty easily raise my arm up to about here, and I would have more than enough travel to get that pommel strike in. This is the danger of doing these kinds of under-the-arm grapples in HEMA. If you're not prepared to take care of that pommel strike, you're going to put yourself in a bad position. But if you account for that, and you put yourself in a good position from the start, and you just make a little adjustment on your underhook, you get all the bonuses of being able to throw people and none of the downsides of having to worry about that lead arm. All right, that's going to be it for today. If you'd like to see your own footage featured on the channel, feel free to send me an email at HEMAFightBreakdowns@gmail.com. Thanks, and see you next time.